Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be back with you now. My name is Carolina Corada. I'm a Course in Miracles teacher. I'm also an author, and I live here in the island of Ibiza. And I host the Ibiza Light Festival every year. But now, today, I'm here to host an interview with Maria Felipe, who's been invited by us to the Global International Conference for Course in Miracles called Awaken to Love. And we're so happy to have Maria here today with us. She is a Course in Miracles teacher. She's a reverend from Pathways of Light, and she's also an author of her first book, Live Your Happy. So I'm very, very happy to introduce you to Maria Felipe. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you, Carolina, for having me. It's such a joy. It's such an honor. I can't believe that this is happening, a global conference like this. It's so beautiful to be able to collaborate. You know, I feel like this is what this is all about, is that you and I getting together and collaborating for, you know, how it says in the book so beautifully, the good, the holy, and the beautiful.
Yes. Yeah, so we are getting more and more international, and I love it because, as maybe you don't know, many people don't know, I am Latin. I was born in Venezuela, even though I live in Spain, and I work here in Europe and around the globe as well. And every time Spanish speakers and English speakers and German speakers are coming together to share the teachings of A Course in Miracles and go beyond the differences that we think there exist, but we know they're not. So our gathering today has a purpose, and it's about sharing how we have been awakening to love, to the love of God, of course. So we are so excited about hearing about your experience, Maria. Tell us, where do you want to begin to tell us about this?
Well, I love the topic, you know, awakening to love, you know, because that's something that is so essential to, I'm all about happiness. So it's so essential to living the happiness that the Course says that is our inheritance and it's our function. Even the Course says God's will for you is happiness. So I've come to understand, and let me say that the Course in Miracles definitely brings you into that space of awakening to that love. And it's essential not only to, it's not so much about learning. I've experienced, it's more about the experience is where it really happens. So real quickly, just my backstory of how I found the Course was with Marianne Williamson's book, Return to Love, back in 1995. And she's Jewish, American woman, and this woman just didn't stop talking about this blue book that was sitting on these tables and in different various situations in her life. And I didn't know what the heck she was talking about. I was at that time in my early 20s, and I was very depressed. I was looking for my purpose in life. I wasn't sure what I was going to do in my life. I was acting, and I was, you know, very successful in doing commercials, but I was very identified with form and being in the business of show business. And I was very sad. And I got to a point that I was so depressed that I couldn't write invoices to my clients. I wanted to sleep all the time. And I didn't understand what this was. So I was searching. And I found her book at a bookstore. And then 5 years later, I would be at Unity Church. It's a non-denominational churches that are here in the United States that they usually host course groups. And I went to a workshop. And I'll never forget, the guy was talking, the instructor, and he said, this is A Course in Miracles. And what it basically is that you are responsible for your perceptions and your experiences. You forgive people for what they didn't do. And I was like, what? And I'm sure all course students could relate to this. It's like so radical. It's so different than what I was taught. And I didn't understand a thing, but I knew that I would study it for the rest of my life. And I did. I started a group, not myself a group, but I was going to a group every Monday. And I was really committed, and I was so intrigued. I would journal every day. I was doing the lessons every day, and I started to feel transformation. It was calling me. The Course was calling me. I feel that it was really, really the truth for me. Although there was some conflict within me because the Course is so radical in its teachings, I wasn't ready. So I would go to the group, and I'm sure many students could identify with this, like on Mondays or Tuesdays, and then you feel great, but then a few days passes and then you feel like crap. So not only was I doing the course, but I had self-help desperation. I was so desperate. I was like reading all kinds of books. At that time, it was Maria Shriver and Anthony Robbins. When he first started, I used to hear his cassette tapes. I used to be affirming, you know, while I was jogging, you know, I am the light, I am love, I am abundance. And I was doing all these things. And Carolina, I was still feeling like crap, you know, at the end of the day. And I didn't understand why. So I was a frustrated course student. And what I realized is when I began to really experience change was when I began to live it without no longer compromising it. And that's how I was able to start to awaken. It was basically when I said, Carolina, like, I am done and I want to start to work this at max capacity without exception. From the morning till I get up and till I go to sleep at night. It's a constant practice of being very vigilant with my thoughts. Are they coming from fear, from love? And what am I choosing? And I'm responsible for that. And also beginning to forgive, which was such a big topic. I didn't understand what forgiveness was. Like, it took me years because my logical mind couldn't understand it. Now I understand it's just a radical concept of so opposite of what the world has taught us, which the course talks about how forgiveness is basically not having judgment. You know, that's basically it. It's like you don't have judgment. And it's funny because the worldly forgiveness is you have judgment. So it took me so long, and till this day, todavía me prende el bombillo, you know, I still, the light comes in my mind. It's like, oh my God, it's like I still sometimes don't even want to practice forgiveness. So for me to be able to awaken, I had to start to be able to get to the space of I am love and I am love versus I am love, but I'm going to look for my love outside of myself in my daily life. Or I am abundance and I'm going to, during the week, pretend my abundance is outside of me instead of recognizing that I am as God created me, which is true abundance. So I had to find that line of unity of like, that is my truth, and live it. And another way that I was able to awaken, Carolina, was by being completely radical. I had to just say, okay, I am ready to awaken. I feel that many of us want to change. We want to change. We're doing the course lessons. We're doing other different types of work, or we're going to workshops, and we really want to change, or we think we do. But with my experience of myself and others, not really. Not really. It's like you want to change, but not really. And I'll tell you why. Because we still want to hang on to something, right? We still want to hang on to like una cosita, like this little thing. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to judge, but this one I'm going to judge. Or I'm going to forgive this one, but I'm not going to forgive this one. So I feel that you have to get to a point that you completely surrender yourself to the teachings and you trust, and then epic things start to happen. You awaken more, Carolina, when you invite your best friend in, your inner friend, your best friend, the Holy Spirit, the course calls it. I call it the love of my life, is the Holy Spirit. I'm constantly asking for guidance. Even if I don't want to, it's just constantly asking for guidance. I feel that a lot of people, it's hard for them because they're like, well, what does spirit sound like? What is it? Does it, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah. It's not like that. It's more for me, it's just inspiration. It's inspiration of where, let me go this way, or let me go that way. Oh, this feels good, or this doesn't feel so good. You start to have like this relationship with spirit. And that's how I've been able to awaken, is by beginning to really practice what the course is teaching, without no longer compromising it,
I had muted the microphone.
Yeah, because the thunders, yeah.
There's so much thunder here. You know, I was listening to you, and what can I say? The broadest aspect that I get is about, you know, looking within instead of without, and also surrendering. You know, um, the idea of surrender, a total letting go, for me, is a basic one in order to begin awakening to love. Because if us as teachers and Course in Miracles students hold on to what we know, hold on to what we think is right, there's no way the divine nature of our own higher self is manifesting itself through all these blocks that we have put in between with our control. So surrender is, I feel, is a big one, and you've just mentioned that. So how has surrender been an important part of your awakening to love?
It's been everything. You know, Carolina, it's been everything. You're right. Within the surrender, there's a healing. And what I got when you were saying surrender is the surrender to the feeling is important. You know, the surrender to how you're feeling, basically feeling our feelings. That is an expression of surrender. It's like, okay, let me go ahead and feel this and surrender to this feeling versus suppress it or put it under the rug. You know, a lot of people think that brushing things under the rug, sometimes they don't realize that they think it's spiritual. It's like, oh, let me just brush it under the rug. I'm enlightened. I've been doing the course lessons for every day and I'm fine. And I don't want to rehash the past. Everything is fine. And that's not, I think being spiritual is being authentic. I always say authenticity is sexy. It is so sexy, you know, when you just expose yourself and you start to really feel that emotion. And within feeling the emotion, you awaken, because that's the only way you're going to go. It's like within feeling it, you start to realize, wow, okay, I'm going to feel this. You feel it to heal it. That's what I say. You feel it to heal it. And you start to experience the feeling of where within that feeling, you can begin to awaken. But you need to go, it's like being above the battleground. And you need to experience that and be above the battleground. And then all of a sudden the veil is lifted. But you need to realize that there's a battleground and there's stuff going on within you that is not being helpful to your growth. So how I've done it is that what you're saying about surrender, I'm going to share with you one story, because surrender for me was huge when I was able to finally awaken. Was I was teaching. I was a minister at Unity Church here, Unity of Burbank. I was running their Spanish service as well as doing their English service. So it was a pretty big task, you know, but, you know, I'm a teacher. I have it all together, supposedly. And supposedly people think I have it together, even though I'm very honest that sometimes I don't. But in this case, I was just at the beginning of my career. And I was still a hot mess when it came to relationships and men. For many of you that don't know my background or don't know me, you know, I've had a big grievance in this lifetime with men. You know, I've made men my God. I've looked for happiness in relationships. And I literally almost died because of this type of addiction. But one of the things that occurred was that I got home from a talk that I gave, and I was thinking about this guy that I was dating. He was a director of this show that I was doing here in LA. And he had told me, Carolina, that he wasn't emotionally available and that he wasn't boyfriend material. He told me this. He said this the day before. And I was trying to think when I got back from my giving that service, that how can I call him or text him and get him over for some pasta? Like, how could I convince this person that has told me he's not emotionally available? How could I get him to my house, right? At this moment, I got so sad, and I was like, Spirit, I am so sad. I feel like I'm not worthy of love. I feel that, you know, every time that I get involved with somebody, I feel like I'm not worthy of it. Or if I want to text, I get nervous. It's like, I'm tired of this. I want to experience my relationship with somebody as a minister and have a good time and not feel so anxious. And anyways, what happens is that in that moment, I was so sad of like my whole lifetime of being with men that were unavailable, and men that basically were reflecting to me a lot of self-hatred. You know, they were very, and I'm sure a lot of people, women and men, could relate to this. They were very destructive relationships. So at this moment, I'm coming back from the service and I'm thinking, wow, I'm such a hot mess that I just gave this amazing service, and I'm sitting on my couch crying, trying to figure out how I'm going to convince this guy to come over. So at this moment I said, Spirit, I just want another way. You know, it's all that moment when you always like surrender, when you're like, there must be another way, or I'm done, or I want help. In this moment, Spirit comes in and says, you need to forgive. And I got the insight, you need to forgive. And what I got was, you need to forgive, and you need to forgive your father. And I had no idea, Carolina. Forgive your father. My father, why? Well, my father, my biological father, because I have a stepfather, which I met when I was 4 years old. He came into my life when I was 4. But my real father committed suicide when I was 3 months old. So Spirit told me that I needed to forgive him. And not only that, Spirit said, you need to forgive all the men in your life. And I was like, holy, okay. I was like, that is a lot of relationships I've had. Okay. I was already like in my late 30s by then. And you know what I did? I downloaded this 7-step forgiveness process, which in my book I call the 7-step fearless process, because it came out in the fearless chapter. But it's basically, Spirit invited me to go in every single day and go back in time and think about the story that I made up of what happened. And I had no idea there was stuff with my dad there. This is what the work that we need to do if we want to wake up. You know, I went back and I felt the feelings of abandonment with him. All these things came up of how dare he. Like, my mom had just lost a son, which was my brother. I never met him either, when he was 9 years old. And then he's like, tries to commit suicide like 5 times. Like, how rude, how mean, you know, how selfish, how dare you? Like, all this stuff started to come up. I started crying, and I started to feel this deep emotion of like abandonment. Like, and the first man and it makes me want to cry just thinking about it. The first man that comes into my life supposedly abandons me. The first one. Then I got from Spirit, then the process is to get from Spirit what is really true, what really happened. And Spirit would share with me, and I journaled this, that my father truly didn't really abandon me, that he had his own things. It's his own story. It's not personal. You see, it's never personal. It was his own story. And he actually did you a favor, because if he would have stayed with you in this lifetime, he would have hindered you, because he was a very jealous person. He was very jealous, very insecure. He would have had you, and you would have rebelled, and you wouldn't have had the lifetime that you had. He did you a favor. He was being loving by letting you go. And I was like, it was a whole nother way of seeing it. And then he says, your real father didn't abandon you. Your father didn't abandon you because your true father is God, and God could never abandon you. And I was like, wow.
Beautiful.
Then from then on, I started healing. I went back in time, and I healed all my supposed relationships with other men and the stories I made up, and wrote letters. And I did this for 7 days. And what I'm trying to say with this is that there has to be a dedication to your work, a practice to your work, because the mind is so cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, like I like to say. It's crazy, and it thinks things that aren't true, and you need that practice to be able to undo that self-hatred. So from then on, it was at the moment when I was very honest, that you said the surrender. There was a moment within the process that I surrendered, and I was like, Spirit, I want to feel love. I want to feel like I'm worthy of love, being in a relationship that is beautiful and that is healthy. I want to experience that, Spirit. I want to have that. And I remember that in that moment of surrender, which this is the key here, the moment of surrender, Carolina, Spirit told me I wasn't ready. It's like, no, you're not ready. And I was like, what do you mean? I've been crying every day. I've been on my knees. I cried for my dad. I've been writing these journals every day. What do you mean I'm not ready? Right? I was so pissed. In that surrender, what happened was I was able to awaken to my barrier. My barrier was I really wanted to change, but there was still stuff I wanted to hang on to. And I couldn't see it before because my mind wasn't capable to.
Yes.
This is why we always do the best we can with the awareness we have in the moment.
Of course.
Right? So that's beautiful what you say, and that surrender is when I was able to actually wake up.
It was your steps towards love.
Mm-hmm.
Surrender.
But as you can see, it took something, it takes something.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the awakening to love in those, I love the way you describe your conversations with spirit. There's so many people having their own ways of speaking to that higher self, to that glorious voice that is always gentle and loving from within. For me, prayer takes a big space within the awakening to love. I don't know. I haven't heard you mention prayer. I don't know if it's a word you use. I'm pretty sure you use that practice, but I don't know, how does that feel for you? Since I've read in the course so many times, that prayer is the vehicle to miracles and whatnot, and being Latin and all, it's there. It seems to be there. It seems to be an important part with love. Prayer, not the prayer like the repetition as a mantra type thing, but the conversation with the higher self. How is that for you? Is prayer any part of it?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, in my book, I had them, after I wrote the whole book, I had them go back, and I wanted to open in prayer the book, like a sort of surrendering the experience of the book to Holy Spirit. And I did do a prayer. It goes like this. It's on page 7, and I said, "Dearest Holy Spirit, I hand over my experience of this book to you. Yeah. I'm willing to let go of my expectations and simply enjoy the ride. I allow you to come into my mind and opening the door for me to see whatever needs to be seen so I may heal and live the happiness that I am worthy of. Guide me, Holy Spirit, sweet Spirit, to read and reread, how much time to spend in this reading, and how I can apply these teachings that works best for me. Amen." So, yeah. So I went back and I wrote this at the end. Like, this was the last thing I wrote. And it's because I wanted to give over the experience, the spirit of the book. And we use this prayer even when I do my 9-week programs. We give over the classes to spirit, It's an integral part, prayer. And people always ask me, well, when is it that I know that it's spirit or ego, or when do I know when to ask spirit or what? I always say that for me my gauge is peace. So if I'm not feeling at peace, that's already a little red sign for me to ask for help from spirit, and to pray. Spirit, come into my mind. This is my prayer. My prayer is usually, if I'm making something very real and I feel like I'm not at peace, I always say, what am I? Love. Where am I? In the mind of God. And what else am I making real? So what is that? What am I making real at that moment? It could be, I don't know, anything. And then if I am making something else real, then I give it over to spirit. And I say, Spirit, let me see this another way. Let me experience this through your eyes, because I'm not capable to right now. And that's a prayer right there. And it's just very automatic, and I think it's essential. I even feel like even speaking to God is a beautiful thing. I do it in the morning, of where I give myself a few seconds just to talk to God, and that's, for me, is prayer as well. And within that, I feel that there has to be, a discipline of being really conscious of your feelings and what you're experiencing. So if you're not at peace, you can stop yourself. I have this process in my book that's called Stop, Look, and Listen. Because listen, you have every right to say, stop world, I want to get off. You have every right, because it's your inheritance, as God says in the book, and Jesus says in the book. Stop, that's it. Like, basta. This is like making me nuts, Stop yourself and just be aware and just look and just look at what's going on. Usually if your train is taking off, your ego train is taking off, like you're about to go there into the madness, if you just stop and you like really look and see where your thoughts are taking you, what thoughts are you having, and then you ask and listen. You're like, whoa, hold on a second. Okay, you got to stop, you got to acknowledge, and then you ask Spirit, I'm losing my mind right now. I'm cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I say in my book, we think a lot of caca thoughts, which is shit, by the way. You know, it's just like all these things, and Spirit will give you an interpretation that is different. And you know what? It might not come at that moment. You know, you might not even receive it in the next few hours because you're not ready for it. But maybe at night, while you're about to go to bed, or maybe when you're having your walk with your dog, you feel a sense of peace that has come over you. And it's because you've asked for help. And it'll come and you'll feel it. You'll feel so much more peaceful and so much better. So that's a great process, is to stop, look, and listen. Is very helpful for me. And I use it a lot. Beautiful.
It is a kind of prayer, isn't it? Stop, look, and listen, and perhaps it has also to do with the honesty that we were talking in a previous interview that we haven't mentioned it yet. But it's like being very radically honest. When you stop, you're becoming aware that you're not at peace. You look. You're being more honest. It's like second stage of honesty, where you actually want to look at what's going on, and then you listen. I would imagine, to your emotions. So radical honesty, like I mentioned early on, it's one of my chapters in my book, and I didn't invent, of course, the idea or the concept. It's been around for a while, but for us, you know, miracle workers and peacemakers, wow, or love receivers and love extenders, can love be without radical honesty?
We need radical honesty to be able to experience love, you know. And for me, it's been a process, you know. I had to get very, very honest with myself, just like how I did the 7-step process. I had to get there to such radical honesty to be able to awaken. One of the things that helps with, you have to be radically honest, because this world of duality is so insane that whatever it is that you do spiritually needs to be radical in so many ways. So for me, it's that whole thing that Course in Miracles says, all you need is a little bit of willingness, and miracles happen. In my book, I say, all you need is a little bit of big willingness, and miracles happen. And for me, it needed to be big and huge. It needed to be expressed that way, just because it's just, my mind is so demented, you know, our minds in this collective sphere, in this consciousness, in this world that we live in. So for me, it's like that big willingness to want to be radically honest. It's like, you know what, I'm done. I want to go ahead and I want to be honest in my life, not especially to myself. But it's funny because it's like, for instance, I have somebody I'm working with now that they're my students at my 9-week program right now. We're in that chapter of doing the 7-step process. And there's one student of mine that just wrote a letter. And they've been together, you know, for 30 years in their relationship. And she wrote a letter to her husband, and she shared it with me, and it made me cry, because that's such honesty. I don't think she has said things like this ever to anyone or to anything. It was like the most beautiful, authentic letter of how sad she is, how these certain things that he does affect her. And it was just so healing and so beautiful to see my dear sister, because all my sisters and brothers, go so deep and honor herself and value herself like that, to really expose her true feelings. Some parts of the letters were victimization, because we tend to do that a little bit, and that's fine. I told her that's okay. What's important is to change things to I statements. I feel like this, or I feel like that, and not say so much you statements. You know, that helps right there. Anyhow, you know, I told her, you know, why don't you read the letter to your husband? And she responded to me in an email, I'm going to tweak what you said to not, to change the victimization conversation. And I'm going to share the letter. And that means everything to me, Carolina, because this is why I do the work that I do, is for us to start to expose ourselves and to be honest, to be completely honest, radically honest, about our feelings. I'm like that in my relationship now. I've been married for 1.5 years now with Christian. And we do something that's called exposing our private thoughts. And we share our private thoughts, which are thoughts that normally you wouldn't say, because you don't want that person to know you like them too much. You don't want to let them know you're so vulnerable. You don't want to let them know that you're not confident or insecure. There's a lot of times that I say things to Christian that are very hard for me to say. And it's funny because a lot of people say, I want the holy relationship. I want the holy relationship. I'm like, yeah, sure. You don't know what you're getting into. Okay. It's really something, the holy relationship. It's funny because it's not like it's overrated, but it's hard because the holy relationship it's a completely exposed relationship of where you can no longer pretend or try to control or make anything happen. It's a total surrender is the holy relationship. It's like you sit down and talk about things that really, really are intense that you totally hide. You totally hide because you want to be loved, So with me being so radically honest with Christian, what happens is that I am free because then the ego doesn't have a hold of me. So those little insecurities start to go away. One of my little secrets was that I'm scared he's going to abandon me. I'm scared he's going to leave me. Why? Because that's my issue. That's my grievance in this lifetime. Yes. And yes, I've healed it to a certain extent. It's so much better. I've made progress because I'm actually in a relationship. So there is some progress. I'm actually experiencing a beautiful, holy relationship with somebody that's holy 95% or 85% of the time. But, it's been so beautiful to expose and say, what, Christian, sometimes I get scared that, you're going to abandon me or that you're going to be out somewhere and meet somebody. And it scares me. It scares me that I'm not going to have the family that I have, the empire that we're going to build together of love and happiness, because Christian's all about speaking about love. Like, is that going to go away, And I'll see people like, I had a secret thought or private thought that I see families at the farmer's market. At the farmer's market, you always see families, like kids and families. And I will look at them and I'll be like, am I going to have that? It's funny because I have it, but I can't appreciate it, or I don't feel worthy of it. That makes sense? So I exposed that to him. And after I exposed that to him, I felt so much better. I was so honest. And then my secret was out, because the ego likes to have private thoughts and doesn't like to share these things because we're going to heal. It tells you the opposite. It says hide your feelings and pretend, because then you have control and then that person will still be with you. But it's not true, because now that I've exposed it, Christian, it doesn't have any more hook on me. Do you know what I mean? Yes. It's so powerful to live this way.
Yes, I can see that. And how, when we are open to awakening to love, we need to release the fear that we have to do something to be worthy of this love. In my experience, the obstacle that I found to be the biggest is to let go of the idea that there was something I had to do to be worthy of the love. And then the lesson received was a message from the inner teacher saying, but you've always been worthy, and you don't need to do anything to receive this love, but just receive it. And perhaps we go through life with our hands closed, saying, please love me, and then the love just falls on closed fists. And then gently we open our fists and we begin to accept it. Well, how does acceptance fit in awakening to love with you? Acceptance.
Well, I love how you described it. It's for me, it fits in with when I've accepted, I felt free. When I've accepted, it's when you accept, you are more present, right? You're more in presence. You're more in the moment. The power of now, like our famous teacher Eckhart Tolle talks about. When you're acceptance, you're in present moment, and when you're in acceptance, you're in forgiveness. because within the forgiveness, you're accepting, you're not judgment, you know? So it's like in acceptance, it's like basically what I said earlier is that you did the best you could with the awareness you had at the moment. And how self-loving is that? Like when you're acceptance, you actually have self-love, you know? And one thing I want to bring up is that it's our natural inheritance, that space that you just were describing. It's natural for us to be there. What you just said of just being in that worthiness. You know, we've been taught in this society, you know, that fear is normal, or like sadness is normal, or depression is normal. It's like goes on in eons and eons of time. It's normal to have all these prescription drugs. You know, it's normal for you to, you know, go through a horrible depression. You know, it's normal for you to be victimized. Like that's a normal thing in life, you know? And I feel like, I was like, no, I feel like happiness is normal. You know, how about easy's normal? You know, how about having perfect health is normal? How about we start changing that conversation? And that's what I'm here to remind people. It's like, listen, we're under the happiness umbrella. Okay, the happiness umbrella is our true essence. We've never left the mind of God. We're under this happiness umbrella, and we're always under it. Now, sometimes we forget. We forget we're not part of God. And for maybe 1 second, we might close the umbrella, or we might believe that we're separated from God. But our inheritance is that we are that happiness. We are that love full time. We just forget for a hot second. And in that moment when we forget, we need to be gentle with ourselves and be like, listen, I'm still learning. It's a learning process still. And I have forgotten who I am. And then I choose again and I come back. Although we've never left, our inheritance is happiness. It's what we are 24/7. You know, when I first came out with my book, I had a lot of people on their podcasts and on their radio shows ask me, can you be happy Monday through Sunday? Can you be happy Monday through Sunday? And I would say with a lot of confidence, yes. Yes. Why? Because if you could be unhappy Monday through Sunday, and that's normal, or you could be fearful and depressed Monday through Sunday, and that's normal. How about the opposite of that? How about if I can be happy Monday through Sunday? Why? Because Jesus tells me God's will for me is happiness. So I feel that our innateness is that truth that you're saying. That's our natural beingness. It's just that we have forgotten. So we need to remember again that easy is normal, and that being happy is normal. And it's actually what is really real and how we could really live our lives. It's just that we have it backwards, and that's okay. But I've come to realize that we are under this happiness umbrella. Like happiness is what we are. It's exactly what we are all the time, 24/7. It's just that we forget. That's all. And we just come back again. But that's what acceptance is. It's basically starting to accept that thought that you are perfect. You know, starting to accept that one thought that you've never left the mind of God. And that takes something. And then when you start to live that way, Carolina, as you know, you begin to be in the world and not of it. Yeah. So what happens is that when you have acceptance, things stop to matter. They stop to matter. It's like there's so many things nowadays that I could hardly care. Okay, it's not that I don't care, like I'm not responsible. It's more like they don't define me. You know, I suffered so much as an actor. It really defined me. I really was identified with that role. And if I didn't get certain jobs, I was a hot mess. But when I began to being a teacher of God, which I was resisting, I said, okay, God, I'm going to be a teacher of God, but this is going to be fun and this is going to be joyful. And I think that's why also I became successful very, very quick, is because I could hardly care. I would just show up and I would just be myself. And I think that's why I also got published, is because I didn't want to write a book, and I wasn't out to write a book, and I didn't identify with being an author or writer. It's just something that I was just chosen to do, and all these like witnesses came in to help me do it because it was a purpose of mine in this lifetime. But I don't identify with it. Why? Because I identified so much with being an author and an actress, that now that I'm a teacher of God, it's more like I'm showing up and God is the boss, and I have nothing to be nervous about. You know, a lot of people ask me, do you get nervous when you speak? No, not really. Just because it's not about me, Maria, the separated self. I need to look good. I need to speak perfect English. You know, it's more like I'm showing up for God, and it's going to look the way it's going to look. And and la gente le va a gustar or la gente no le va a gustar. You know, people are going to like it or people are not going to like it. And that's okay. And that's why my book has been so much fun, because I'm not attached to results. I'm not attached to it being a bestseller or selling a lot. Yeah, of course I do my part. I promote it. I'm very happy. I'm very excited about it. But the difference is, Carolina, that it doesn't define me. Yes. And that's when you start to have true acceptance. It's like, this book doesn't define me. My relationship doesn't define me. Being a mother now doesn't define me. Having whatever money I have in the bank doesn't define me. Even being on this interview right now doesn't define me. God defines me. God defines me. And that's the difference. That's the difference. It's beautiful. So powerful.
Thank you so much for that. And I love the way you use that to describe acceptance. Acceptance is truly, has all to do with being quiet and still, and not trying to understand how things are working or why, not trying to control them, like you were saying right now. It doesn't define you. There's nothing you need to do. You just show up and say, yeah, I accept. What needs to be done here? And it's so beautiful. And what needs to be done here for me is always love. Can there be any other purpose?
Yeah, I mean, of course not. You know, it's like that's the purpose. You know, it's always going back to love. And then you think, well, what is love? You know, this word is so overused, you know, in so many ways. And I think one thing is to go ahead and, you know, say it left and right, I love you, or love, love, love. And I think the difference is to live it. You know, that's why my book is called Live You're Happy. I mean, it would be called Live A Course in Miracles, but that's played out. So I call it Live You're Happy. But it's basically living that expression of love. So how do we do that? Well, you walk around in this world and you're very conscious of your thoughts and you're conscious of what you are doing. So basically, is this loving? Is this conversation I'm having with this person, is this coming from love? Is this text coming from love? Is this email coming from love? Like, where is the space coming from? Is it coming from a space of valuing myself, of loving myself, my true self? I'm not talking about the separated self, Maria. I'm talking about my true self. And then, you know, there's this whole thing that I do. One of the most beautiful exercises that I do daily, which is in my book, is called We Share the Same Love. So I'll be driving and maybe I'll get a peek at the driver that's next to me and I'll just silently say in my mind, we share the same love. Or I'll go to the grocery store and I'll be checking out, buying apples or whatever, and I'll look at the cashier register, the guy that's checking me out, and I'll be like, we share the same love. And I constantly just repeat that in my mind to everyone in my sphere of I share the same love. And I feel very high. It's like a natural drug for me, because I start to feel like very giddy and excited, you know, and I start to have like an energy in my sphere that's so different than if I didn't do that exercise, you know. And then there's an acceptance here, an acceptance that I'm the creator of my experience. There's an acceptance of like I've created being in that moment, in that time. You know, sometimes I don't even believe I'm in traffic. You know, I've created this moment of what it appears this collision of all these cars. But at that moment, there's something for me to see and to learn. It's not really like I'm stuck in traffic. You know, my logical mind would say I'm stuck in traffic, but my true self would say I'm stuck in love, you know, because I'm there to kind of even wake up more to love, you know. So I think that when I began to really experience this whole awakening to love was when I began to, as you say, to be completely accepting and to, again, get really committed. And, you know, the Course says we're too okay with mind wandering, and we have no discipline. And this is why the whole book says things over and over again, and this is why the lessons are there for us. It's because our mind is undisciplined. So I can't stress enough in this interview how important practice is. The daily practice from when you wake up in the morning to you go to sleep at night. It's a constant practice of taking responsibility for your thoughts throughout the day, forgiveness practice throughout the day, and constantly remembering you have everything and you lack nothing. And deep trust, you know, I'm not talking about the old trust, like I trust you because, you know, you've been a good boy or a good girl, or, you know, all this type of stuff. It's more like of a trust in spirit that everything's okay and everything's exactly perfect. You know, I call in my book this thing that's called big deals. Big deals are like, you have to stand in line for a license, or oh, look, this is a big deal. A big deal is like, for instance, my son, we're going to go to Europe soon with my son. My son is 4 months old and he needs a passport. So we got his passport. Everything's fine. It turns out the passport was supposed to be here a week ago. Supposedly it was scanned by the post office and it's supposed to be in the mailbox, and it's not. Supposedly it's arrived. So that's a big deal. Big deal is we're about to go on our trip and we don't have a passport for my son, right? At first, the ego starts, oh, I don't have a passport and my trip and I have a book event. And how am I going to get to this place in Europe to do this book event if my son can't come with me? I'm breastfeeding. It was all this story, right? For a second. Then I recognized, I stopped myself because it's a big deal. I'm making it a big deal and it really doesn't matter. My ego makes it matter so much. It's like, I worry about things and I don't even worry about them. I think about them when it's time to think about them. And right now it's not the time because it's a weekend of where I can't call anybody or get anything done. So I'm going to enjoy myself with Carolina, my best friend. And then tomorrow, Monday, I'll deal with it. Okay. So this is what we do when we have acceptance and love in our lives. It's like stuff of the world starts to have a hook, less of a hook on you. And they don't take away your peace. You know, something like this could definitely take away anybody's peace, right? Because there's a lot of money involved here. Tickets that have been bought, scheduled events that people have already bought. There's a lot of stuff going on here that I could make a big deal about. But I'm like, no, I prefer my peace of mind. And it's God's will for me to have peace of mind. So I'll deal with it when I get to it. And it's actually going to be exactly perfect any way it turns out, right? So that's what I'm getting at here. That is love. That is love. It's really recognizing what is really true, which is all this stuff that has nothing to do with form and world. It has everything to do with God, and that it's exactly perfect. That is love. It's exactly perfect. And it's exactly the way it's supposed to be. It's like this is just reminding me again that this world is really crazy. It just reminds me again, this is crazy. Like how does somebody lose a passport? And it happens to people all the time on Google. I Googled it. Everybody loses their passport, like sometimes, because they just disappear. I'm not the only one. So it's just, for me, it just reminds me again, wow, I'm dreaming. This world is nuts. Good. I'm not going to be part of that nuttiness anymore.
Thank you so much, Maria. You know, I feel really, really inspired by our conversation today. I want to thank you deeply. And I'm pretty sure everyone out there listening to you and to our meeting together is as happy as I feel. I'm so grateful. I really, really enjoyed this time together. And I just have to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And I trust we will meet each other very soon in person. If not,
Yes.
again in another interview. So we have a few minutes left if you want to say goodbye to those watching us and who have been inspired, I'm sure, by your words like I have been. And for you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Carolina. I just wanted to share real quick, as per requested by my husband, because he did a beautiful website for me. It's mariafelipe.org. And if you don't have the book Live Your Happy, you can actually get a free introduction chapter on my website. So you can read it and see if you're even interested in it. And it has beautiful stories, and it kind of gives you like a little feel of what you'll get. Also, he's created a workbook that actually goes with the book that we're offering as well, on my website as well. I also have 3 powerful talks that I've given based on the Course in Miracles that you can actually download for free. And I have a YouTube channel, which I would love to have you on, Carolina, at some point. It's called Live Your Happy. And if you just Google Live Your Happy or Maria Coconut TV, I have interviews with other spiritual leaders on there, as well as other talks that I've given in both Spanish and English, because as Carolina knows, we're both bilingual, you know. So Live Your Happy is also available in Spanish. So para toda la audiencia en español as well, it's available. But aside from that, aside from the request of my husband, I do want to leave you with some words, which I always like to close with, which is the reminder of being responsible and just taking responsibility for your perceptions, for your thinking, for what you're making mean or what you're valuing, is to be just take responsibility of what you're choosing, and also to forgive even if you don't want to, you know, because at the end you're just going to feel a lot better, a lot happier. And then lastly, I always like to end that to just remember that you have everything and you lack nothing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina.
Thank you everyone for being here with us, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy the next interview as much as we've enjoyed this one. Have a lovely day and see you in
Bye, everybody.
Bye.